How did Emperor Constantine impact Christianity? Early Christians viewed Constantine as a great Christian, though later historians question the motivation behind his conversion. However, Constantine's legacy is extremely complicated, but also dynamic and transformative in often contradictory ways. First, Constantine created a society that fused Christianity with Roman culture. Secondly, his financial policies affected the church immensely. And thirdly, he centralized power in the church and stomped out the heretical branches of the church. Firstly, Constantine helped to create a syncretic society that fused Roman culture with Christianity. Constantine supposedly converted to Christianity in 312 AD, but he wasn't actually baptized until he was about to die, 25 years later. That was because baptism was believed to wash away a person's sins. Constantine delayed his baptism because he had some pretty big sins to do before he could be baptized. He actually murdered his wife and son because he suspected them of committing adultery with each other. To murder his wife, he actually boiled her alive. So this is why it was so important to him to have a baptism right before his death. Constantine endorsed the church's leaders' decision to move emphasis away from Christianity's Jewish roots. He supported moving Easter away from the Jewish festival of Passover. Long after Constantine's conversion, he had coins made that had a portrait of himself on one side and the depiction of the god of the unconquered sun on the other. This showed that while he may have truly believed in the Christian God, he also believed in his pagan gods. He sets apart Sunday, the day dedicated to the sun god, as the weekly day of rest throughout the empire. In AD 321, Constantine said, quote, "On the venerable day of the sun, let the magistrates and people residing in cities rest, and let all workshops be closed," unquote. However, for Christians, it made sense for the new Sabbath to be on Sunday, because the day was the weekly celebration of Christ's resurrection, or Little Easter. As the Christians would awake at sunrise each Sunday morning and meet together for church. My second point is that Constantine's financial policies towards the church strengthened its charitable work, but brought many non-Christians into leadership. Before the legalization of Christianity by Constantine in 313 AD, Christians actually built very strong relationships with each other because Christianity was illegal. They were outlaws whose lives were always at risk. We can also infer that all professing Christians were true believers because to be a Christian had no political or social advantage, quite a disadvantage. As Everett Ferguson writes, quote, it seems that the first property owned by the Roman Church were catacombs. These were not places of meeting, however, but burial sites, unquote. We'll talk more about this later. However, all of this would change upon the legalization of Christianity. From around 320 to 330 AD, Constantine began to reposition himself as the head of the church, unifying his power over both the church and the state. Constantine made the church tax-exempt, allowing for rapid expansion. And for the building of specialized places of worship. So actual church buildings were allowed to be bought by the Christians. This contrasts the informal house church gatherings, characteristic of the early church. Unfortunately, many were attracted to the church now because they wanted money or position instead of a real religious devotion. My third point is that by centralizing power, Constantine helped to stamp out heretical branches of the church. In his quest to solidify his control over the entire Roman Empire, Constantine pushed for centralized theological decision-making. Thus, he helped to remove heretical movements from authority. Many heretical doctrines were actually very zealously supported, but followers did not meet unified in church buildings. When Constantine passed a law that Christians must meet in churches rather than houses or public spaces, according to Sozomen, quote, "By means of this law, almost all heresies, I believe, disappeared," unquote. Constantine called for the Council of Nicaea in 325 AD. Because a great controversy had arisen between the churches over the nature of Jesus. Arius, on one side, had taught that Jesus was not made of the same substance as God, while other church leaders argued that, of course, he had to be. In the Council of Nicaea, 318 bishops gathered and rejected Arianism after a period of debate. They then wrote the Nicene Creed, and Constantine decreed that Arius' writings should be burned. In conclusion, despite the differences in Constantine's portrayal throughout history, Constantine's legacy remains extremely complicated, being both dramatic and transformative in often contradictory ways. Constantine first created a society that fused Christianity with Roman culture. Secondly, his financial policies brought great change to the church. And thirdly, he helped to stomp out heresies in the church. Thank you.